Hey everybody, this is Cody Knight 22 here. Welcome to Cody Talks Fanfiction, episode number 18. Brief reminder that I will be throwing into the beginning of this video. There will be an interview being taken place with the creator of RWBY Quest, creator slash illustrator slash author of RWBY Quest. If you have any questions for them, leave them in the comments below. I will be sure to get around to them, and I'll be asking those that I don't censor out. Otherwise, you guys are here for this episode. So what is the theme to this episode? Well, there's really only one way that you can follow up a Bumblebee episode, and that's with a White Rose episode. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Prepare yourselves. One of my OTPs, one of my biggest OTPs, is White Rose. So I will say this right off the bat. This all the way through, this is probably the single best episode in terms of like just consistency of story quality. This is the best episode I think that I've done in terms of story quality. I really wanted to challenge myself, I guess, with finding cons. So let us begin with talking about the pros and cons and stuff. Or talking about pros and cons. Let's start off by actually telling you what the hell the first story is, and then I'll tell you what I like and dislike about it, which is very little. In terms of disliking, anyways. This is going to be A Frozen Heart by Cushy Siren 3. Weiss has been acting peculiar lately and is beginning to affect her team, and RWBY most of all. Everyone grows wary as Team RWBY begins to fall apart and resentment grows, but naturally, not all is as it seems. Gotta love that last line, eh? Always, it's just cheese. That's the way I view it. Right, so this is going to be A Frozen Heart. Summaries actually kind of accurately describes it. Weiss starts a lot of shit, and everybody's like, Weiss, what the hell? And she's just like, well, I'm Weiss. And this is paraphrasing to the max, of course. And so then they're like, okay, well, we need to figure out, like, and then it's kind of like, okay, you know, Weiss continues to be a complete and total bitch, and it causes distance to kind of grow around her and her team. The reason Weiss is being a total bitch is this is a White Rose episode after all. It's because she loves RWBY and she hates the fact that she does. So, what are some things that I like about this? The number one thing that I kind of like is the way that Weiss is handled. Or at least in terms of like the bitchy side of things, where it really is, it's a notice. There's Weiss. At the time when I first read this, we only had volume 1 Weiss, but there was the Weiss that we knew to be canon, and then there was this Weiss, and it was very, very clear that there was a disconnect between those two things, and I think that it was really well done. And by disconnect, by the way, I mean, like, this was very obvious that this was a different telling of Weiss, and that was intentional. That this Weiss was supposed to be, god damn it, that this Weiss was supposed to be worse than the Weiss in canon, and it was clear, it was well done, and I like the way that it was kind of done worse, because it was a heightened. It wasn't really a completely different Weiss, it was a heightened version of that Weiss. So I like that, I really do, I really enjoyed that. The other thing that I did like was the fact that it was, I always enjoy this. It was Blake who learned about Weiss and what she was doing, and I really did like that. I like that it was done with Blake to kind of learn about this, where it's a nice and even trade-off. Or sorry, Blake knew how Weiss felt about RWBY, and Blake is kind of just very subtle. It was like, hey, you should tell her, you should tell her, you should tell her before this becomes a bigger issue. Spoiler alert, it becomes a bigger issue. And yeah, and the other thing that I do like is that it's not solely stuck on Weiss's point of view, but it's mostly Weiss-centered. And it makes more sense for it to be mostly Weiss-centered, as opposed to having it be like a multi-center story, all constantly switching. I like that it is stuck on one. And that I don't know why, it just makes me happy. I like the way that all the other characters are portrayed, but it makes me happy. I kind of like the conflict that goes on between Weiss and Yang. Not quite as much as I like some of the other things, but I do enjoy it. I still enjoy it regardless. Other pluses, I'm assuming that the romance is going to be good. I mean, we haven't had any, spoiler alert, we haven't had any real romance yet. We've had some things occur in terms of romance, and I do like the way that it was handled, but we still don't have a ton. I mean, we still don't have a ton of romance, so I cannot fairly judge any of that. The other plus that I'm going to give this story is going to be, it's very, very atmospheric, and it can be, if you marathon read this, it can be very suspenseful. I think that the atmosphere is done really, 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 really well. And it makes you get that kind of sense of impending doom in some ways when you're reading through the story. So for that, I'm extremely appreciative, because I absolutely adore stories with a good atmosphere. Now, of course, as always, I do have to move on to some other things. Some things that I did not enjoy quite as much as some of the other stuff. There are moments, Weiss's dialogue with some other people. I know that it was meant to be a heightened version of Weiss. Sometimes it can be a little bit too much so in terms of that heightened direction, and it becomes out of character rather than really properly heightened. And that bothers me a little bit. The fact that Weiss can be portrayed, it falls into a little bit out of line, a little bit out of character. And I do wish it was. And this is nitpicking, by the way. I do want to clarify that this is extraordinarily nitpicking, because sometimes you gotta nitpick if I want to actually have a series to make. Other thing is that if I remember correctly, the moment with Blake was a little bit too easy. I think that Blake's moment with Weiss, when she finds out, it was done, I think, a little bit too smoothly. I felt as though there should have been a little bit more conflict/battle centering around that. Just because this is, to me, it's a pretty big deal, and it is still Blake. And I think that it always should be made into a slightly bigger deal. That's really, I don't have a ton to say about the story. I think that despite how far we are into it, his story still is not nearly done developing everything. I think that, with this, I will say this, actually, kind of another thing. It's fantastic. This is a great story, but it still feels very underdeveloped. Where we are right now is the next word that we see is going to be word number 33,208, and it'll be on chapter 15. And so that's a fair amount. I would like for this to have been developed a little bit more. I think that some parts just were not developed as much as you would expect from a story that's 15 chapters in. That is a personal belief, of course, but I honestly would say that I don't think that it's been developed enough for where it's at. I think that for where it is at, it should be more developed than what it is. But otherwise, though, I've got to say, it's not a ton underdeveloped. I mean, like I said, the atmosphere is great. I think that the only thing really lacking in certain parts is dialogue, is better dialogue. And I think that's the part that needs to be developed more. And characterization, I think that right now we have good characterization for Weiss, but not really so much so anybody else. So I think that's what I mean by underdevelopment. That being said, we have good characterization for pretty much everybody, just not really good stuff. And really, I would like to see RWBY be developed a little bit more, looking at a more specific thing. Just personal opinions. A lot of people are probably going to disagree with me here, but that's just what I think. And but otherwise, I gotta say, like I said, this is still a fantastic story, and I still really love this. So for that, I'm going to have to start this video out with a 9, because I think that this is more than worthy of a 9. I definitely recommend it very highly to anybody that wants to read it. I think that it is more than worthwhile. And yeah, it's not recommendation of the video. It doesn't boil down to that, but it's still pretty fucking phenomenal. So moving on from A Frozen Heart. This is going to be Layer of Ice by LazyKatze. So that now means that I've gotten on Elfin Lied, RWBY, and LazyKatze, who are just three people that for some reason I associate with each other in my mind. Let's read the description. Ruby's been in love with Weiss Schnee ever since she laid eyes on her. But is she really as perfect as everyone says she is? White Rose High School AU. So this story is premise very basic. Ruby is in love with Weiss. Weiss seems to be the nice girl that everybody loves and is, perfect and stuff. And then it turns out and then Ruby discovers her one day not being perfect when she's bitchy at a supermarket towards Ruby. And Weiss requests that Ruby says nothing about it, because if it does, then it's going to cause problems for her. And so Ruby basically blackmails Weiss into trying to spend more time with her. And as she spends more time with him, she realizes, that more and more kind of what's going on. And then there's a big issue with Weiss and her father, where her father is really focused on the fake perfect Weiss that he wants to have versus the real Weiss. Premise not too complicated. Execution is wonderful though. I had heard a decent amount about the prose coming into this story, about the way that the characters speak, and afterwards I have to say that it is absolutely justified. All the praise towards the prose is that makes me happy to say for some reason. All the praise towards the prose is wonderful, and it makes me happy. Because I love it when characters talk in a way that in a story they talk in a way that you can see them talking in the show, and that is the case here. And the praise towards her prose makes everything worthwhile, or was absolutely worthwhile. And I'm here to praise the prose as well. All the characters speak in very believable fashions. I like the fact that that she has Weiss cursing, because Weiss cursing is it felt very believable the way that it was gone about, and it made me happy. And the next point of praise that I want to give is going to overall be the portrayal of Ruby and Jean's relationship in a high school world. They're best friends, and they're both huge nerds, and they play video games together, and that's their big shtick. And that makes me so incredibly happy, because it's really well done. Jean is even more so a dork, and everybody loves the lovable dork. And he just kind of plays games. He does all these different things that it really just plays more into his character rather than playing out of it. And he is very he still is not great at things, but he's good enough at things. And he keeps failing his driver's test is another joke. Kind of was become, I guess, a running joke for the story. And I love it. It's obviously the portrayal of Ruby is very very good, very very innocent, and I like it. The portrayal of Weiss is very layered, and I do like, which, hey, it's convenient, layer of ice, right? It's very layered, and that I really do appreciate the fact that you're never showing all the layers at once. Weiss shows the layers that she wants to show, and that makes everything really really fun. Next, and then the other point of praise I'm going to give before moving on is I like the way that everything has been set up. I like the different roles assigned to people. Ruby living with Yang alone. Blake kind of. You have Blake, and you have the way that she is portrayed, Weiss and her father's relationship, Ruby and Jean really is kind of the big thing there. Not a ton of pure involvement. I like the roles though that were assigned to everybody. I think that it all very much so fit how they might be in a high school AU. And I also do like that there is inclusion of Cinder, Emerald, and Mercury just not like majorly, and they're actually everybody's age. So, you know, insert 21 Jump Street joke here about Cinder. But got to move on to a couple of the cons. The prose is great. The prose is wonderful. Atmosphere is a little lacking. It's not massive. It's not major. It's not like, oh God, this atmosphere, I can't do anything with it. Oh. It's more along the lines of when they're speaking, you have a very clear idea of what's going on, of how you're supposed to feel. But when they're not speaking, you don't get that. You do not get that same sense. If it just goes on and it's a, you know, and it's a period where you don't have any prose, typically you will not get the same sense of things as you do when there is prose, and that's needs to be worked on a little bit. There needs to be more development based around the atmosphere rather than the prose. But the prose, once again, it's great. Atmosphere is still good. I mean, it's still a really good atmosphere. I'm not saying that it's bad or anything, but could be better. It could be better at the end of the day, and in all honesty, it should be better, I feel. I think that very, very clearly Katze has demonstrated her ability to write these things and set up these things and talk through these things. And so that makes me believe that if she, you know, that she can. I don't know where I was going with that at first, but that makes me believe that she can, right, do the prose and do it well, or do the atmosphere and do it well. So, you know, personal beliefs, whatever, agree with me, disagree, love me, hate me, say what you want about me, all those and all the boys, what reviews you gave me. So I just think that this is, but I will say this, if you're looking for good examples of prose, go here, but atmosphere, not so much. Atmosphere needs to be developed more. The other kind of con that I'm going to say is that Weiss's relationship with her father is very, very good, but more often than not, it's brushed. It feels brushed under the rug a little bit. Not a ton. It's not like, oh my, you know, it's just not like, oh yeah, I got a bad relationship with my father. But, you know, there are just some things where there's clearly a conflict going on with Weiss and her father, and you hear nothing of it. And I mean, you have one really big Weiss developmental chapter, which was expected, and this is, I guess, another con, but the Weiss developmental chapter, the big one that was done based purely around Weiss, was very expected. It was very straightforward. There wasn't a ton extra to it, and it was all right. It was the only real all right chapter in this. Everything else has been pretty great, but that chapter was and you know, that's just, you had a great, it's a great thing going on with that story, but sometimes there are just some parts that aren't emphasized as much as others. That being so, that's really my major point here, is the fact that the atmosphere, between the atmosphere and Weiss's relationship with her father, those are two things that tend to be fairly underdeveloped, except for that one chapter, where you had this Weiss's big moment. So I think that there needs to be more time spent on that, in terms of focusing attention on that. That's personal belief, once again. And, you know, I think it would make the story better. If the story had a better atmosphere, I think that it would make it better overall. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna say another 9 to this, because this is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful story. Still not the recommendation of the video, but it is a wonderful story. And with that is going to conclude Layer of Ice. This is going to be polishing it off with somebody that has had a story on Cody Talks Fanfiction before, and has also has had a story repeat on Cody Talks Fanfiction before. And this is going to be Hypothermia by EleaDancingOnAPin. So hello again, Elea, starting off. And I keep forgetting to read the description. I don't know what's wrong with me today. Symptoms include shivering when she touches you, your mind freezing after just one thought of her, loss of coordination so you look like a spaz at all the wrong times, and difficulty speaking when she says your name. White Rose AU, some other pairings on the side. So this is that basically, this is RWBY gets accepted into a very prestigious academy, or Beacon, duh. And she tests in there, and she gets a full ride, and she gets like all the free meal plans. And Weiss is, RWBY sees Weiss, and it's just kind of like very, very clear that Weiss is the big name on campus, is the big name around campus. And RWBY is just kind of like, oh, well, this will... she's just kind of like, oh, wow, this is like amazing. I should talk to her. And then eventually they do talk, and they kind of get to become friends, and a lot of other things happen. They become friends, and then there's definitely, White Rose happens. Spoiler alert. Believe it or not, the White Rose fic has White Rose happening. Hey, sorry about that. I got a phone call, and I don't remember where I was. So yes, there's White Rose in this fic. And this is really well done. When I read In Love with the Gardener by Aaliyah, it was I was like, wow, this is really, really amazing. This is really good. This is definitely the better story, though. It's just, without a question, this is the better story. And some reasonings behind that is, first of all, the way that White Rose came about, to me, was really, really good. Was really good and really clever. And I think that, well, not clever. It was really good. And I think that you absolutely, with this is one of the better ways to do White Rose. I would highly recommend people reading through the story. Don't copy directly. But once again, she has a really great understanding of White Rose. Another plus side to this story is I like the fact, and this made that she made Weiss friendlier initially towards RWBY in a way that made sense. Where Weiss saw RWBY and she realized that this is probably somebody, or this is somebody that got into Beacon, and unlike most people, there's no way that she could have paid her way in. And when you pay and so by that token, that means that she must be good. That she must be good, and Weiss respects that. She respects people that are good, as was already demonstrated by the show, is that if you are good, then you earn Weiss's respect. So it was done in a really way that did get called into question as being out of character, but it wasn't really. It was not out of character for Weiss, and it made total sense with how her character is. And, of course, this is AU, so modified slightly, but it's still great. I really like the first chapter a lot. I gotta say that this is one of the better first chapters that I've read in fan fiction. It really set the stage nicely for everything. It really made everything... It made a lot of things more worthwhile, which made me happy. And it's just... I don't know, there's something about this fic that is a mixture of kind of like happiness and a sense of impending doom early on. When it is Weiss and RWBY... and you just have both of them kind of becoming very close with each other through friendship, and then all of a sudden, it becomes more than that for Weiss, and you only see it from Weiss's perspective, and that was really great. The whole part about the romance, where you can only tell from Weiss's perspective, was really great, because then something happened. Because then there was fuck it. Spoiler alert. Because then there was the moment where RWBY and Weiss kissed, and then RWBY ran off because she felt as though she had forced herself upon Weiss. And it was an odd paradox that fit those characters very, very well. And Weiss initially was too stubborn to believe that RWBY was missing time at school for any other reason, for the reason of her, and she just wanted to go visit RWBY. And it was cute, but it wasn't cutesy, if that makes sense. Where cutesy is much more innocent, much more playful, much less serious. This was definitely not that. It was still felt very serious. It still felt, I guess it still felt a little innocent, but it just wasn't cutesy, and it was done in the proper way to make you feel. Prose is good. Atmosphere is really, really good. On to the other points of the story, though. And I know I've been sounding like a broken record. I won't this time, but I've been sounding like a broken record saying atmosphere, so I won't do it again, because I actually really enjoy this atmosphere a lot, and I don't think that anything's really too underdeveloped. But my only real con with this story is that I believe it was chapter 5. Don't quote me. on this. Yes, chapter 5. And chapter 5 dealt with the issue of Eleanor, who is a friend of Ruby and Weiss, a friend of Ruby's that Weiss kind of gets to know. And it dealt with the issue where she is transgender, and you know how that's kind of treated about it, and it was very much so like a real world thing, etc., etc. But the only issue was that it wasn't done. Transgender. Okay, so let me just start this off by this: the issue of LGBT or LGBTQT or however many letters are in that thing, and I don't know all of them. It's a very real issue, and it's and I do like the fact that some people try to show that it's a real issue. This just wasn't done right. It just was not done properly. It didn't flow with the rest of the story. It felt very much so like an interruption rather than a naturally flowing occurrence, and it just wasn't right. It just did not feel right compared to the rest of the story. And you kind of had the rest of the story, and at chapter 5, Ruby and Weiss had just gotten together, and they were just. It was with how do I phrase this? It was good intentions, very good intentions were on the behalf of this occurring, and I think that the issue overall, I think it was portrayed somewhat realistically, but it didn't flow with the rest of the story. It was a very, actually, you know what? Hang on, A Harsh Interruption is the name of the chapter, and oddly enough, that's kind of what this chapter feels like with the rest of the story. It feels like a harsh interruption to the rest of the story, where it was going along at a good flow, covering White Rose and stuff, and then all of a sudden Eleanor's there, and then there's a big issue with the transgender thing, and then it did not appear again in the next chapter. If I remember correctly, it did not appear again in the next chapter. It was strange. At the end of the day, it's the only word that I can really use to describe it. It was strange, and it was misplaced, and I don't know. It's something about this chapter. I don't know if I could say exactly what it was, but there's something that's not right about it with the rest of the story. And that's really my only major con to this, is the fact that I wish that one particular chapter had been gone about in a different way, and a much more of a build up, because it just kind of happens. And there isn't really any build up to it too. I mean, you have especially the way that Aaliyah actually let it off was wait, hang on. For anyone who cares, I want to make sure I don't drown. That would be embarrassing. For anyone who cares to keep reading this is what I meant when I said I wanted this fic to deal with some of my personal issues. I think it's a shame that people who write really gay fics don't bother to talk about the issues of being some flavor of LGBTQ, except for some people don't like gay people, and that's sad. I tried to do some more complex stuff too, and I hope it turned out well. And don't worry, there's fluff and stuff too. Let it off like that. So what's your first instinct is Ruby and Weiss and addressing Weiss's family. And then it turns out to be Eleanor, which I would have been fine with, but it was out of left field. At the end of the day, it kind of boils down to it was out of left field, and damn, it's really unfortunate that it was. Because otherwise, this is a fantastic fic. And, you just kind of have that one moment, though. You have that one chapter that, unfortunately, it sticks out. It sticks out in your mind. But otherwise, I would say that this is a story that gets the recommendation of the video. It's currently in a battle for my 5th favorite story with Melting Veil. And at the end of the day, I will give it 9.5 because this is awesome. Recommendation of the video. Worthwhile read. Honestly, the first 4 chapters are fucking incredible. 5 and 6, well, 5, 6 is still really good, but the first 4 chapters were absolutely phenomenal, and I definitely think that there will continuously be that quality of writing. I think that chapter 5 specifically, last chapter not so much so. I think that the last chapter felt right back on the right track, but I really, really enjoy this story. Oh, one thing I did forget to mention, I forgot that she has Weiss's journals in there, and I like that it was kind of like, I'm not going to show you directly the development for them becoming more than friends, for Weiss developing feelings for Ruby as more than friends, but I'm going to tell you about it in a way that makes sense. So it was kind of like you still got that emotion from it, but it was told in a way that makes sense. So I just forgot to include that on my pros, but you know, this is fantastic. This is a recommendation of the video, and otherwise an incredibly solid episode. I mean, think of it this way: this episode I have layer of ice, a frozen heart, and hypothermia. I could also call this the ice themed episode. That just occurred to me. The frozen themed. But otherwise, that is going to do it for me this week. And so, as usual, tune in this Friday, where I will have an episode of, well, I have the new episode of Freaky Friday out, and Outlast, of course, still playing that in the dark. Tune in next Wednesday for the interview coming out with the creator of Ruby Quest. Please leave your questions in the comments below if you have any. If you do not know what Ruby Quest is, go to episode 16. It will be linked in that episode, the comics episode. Otherwise, oh, and of course, there might be a little project going on for me, possibly, potentially, that I'm not going to be willing to share just yet. So, otherwise, boy. Never was just a soft opera.